Hello and welcome to the Your Financial Pharmacist Real Estate Investing Podcast, a show all about empowering pharmacists to achieve financial freedom through real estate investing. I'm Nate Hedrick, and each week, my co-host David Bright and I explore stories from pharmacists all over the country who are achieving their real estate goals while maintaining a meaningful career in pharmacy. Whether you're a first-time investor or a seasoned pro, we're here to provide education and inspiration about the world of real estate. Please note, this podcast is intended for educational purposes only and should not be considered financial or investment advice. Hey, David, how's it going?
Hey, good, thanks. How you doing, man?
Good. It's been a hot week here, and so not a good time to work outside, but it's been a good week to spend with the girls. We were at the pool yesterday and probably going to go there again tomorrow, so it's been a good week to hang out with the kiddos.
Yeah, definitely pool weather. Even in Michigan here, it's where we do our investing, where we live, it is hot out right now. So this is definitely the season. But for us in Michigan, this is one of the first weeks it's not snowing, right? Not literally, right? But this is where we can do exterior painting without worrying that the temperature is going to drop. So
exactly.
We've been doing a lot of the exterior work on properties, and I got a photo sent to me just a couple days ago of an exterior of a property that was pretty seriously ugly. I even posted this one to the YFP Real Estate Investing Facebook group because we don't do a lot of exterior cosmetic work. We more just jump in and work on interiors, but this one was just so horrifically ugly. It needed something. And so I reached out for advice to those that do more work. So yeah, I'll have to share back that photo and as a sign of appreciation of those that weighed in on that. So thank you to the YFP Real Estate Investing Facebook community for crowdsourcing some advice on some exterior cosmetics for this property.
Yeah, I want to see that when it's all done. That's always a hard decision to make because you want to go bold enough to look good and interesting, but not so bold that you're alienating 25% of the people that would buy it. So that's a tricky line to walk. So yeah, a good reminder too, that if you are interested in learning more about other pharmacists, other people in the community doing the same things that we're talking about every day, that is real estate investing, definitely check out the YFP Real Estate Investing Facebook group. Awesome way to connect with guests just like the Tyler, who we're going to talk to today.
Yeah, Tyler's one of those who does bring a lot of experience with those property rehabs. I know that was how he got his start, was taking some of those ugly properties and making them pretty, which is again fantastic. I know something you and I both really enjoy.
Yeah, for sure. And so Tyler Dalton, he is a pharmacist, a real estate investor. He's into functional medicine. He's actually a fourth generation pharmacist. And I think he's the eighth one in his family. You'll have to listen for that on the show. So really cool pharmacy background and just a really inspiring real estate investing background. He knew early on he wanted to get into real estate investing and just exploded with how he was able to grow his portfolio.
Yeah, right out of the gates. He starts out talking about how he bought 10 houses in his first 2 years and doing a lot of work and supervising the projects and being very hands-on in the beginning there too, which is impressive at any level, but being a full-time pharmacist and still finding a way to squeeze that in, that's super impressive and inspiring that he was able to do that.
Yeah, and even not just the 10, right? He's grown from there even. So now he's looking at short-term rentals.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's been looking at just ways to continue that growth so that he can eventually replace his pharmacy income, which I think, again, some of our audience is interested in doing. And so it was great to hear from somebody that's really pretty far down that path.
Yeah, one of the things that he's done too in going from those initial 10 properties, now other strategies, is he talks for a minute about the 1031 exchange, which is a little more of an advanced tax strategy that may be a fit for some investors, particularly when we're in this environment where property has appreciated pretty significantly over the past few years. For investors that are thinking about selling something, but where they would realize a pretty significant gain, the 1031 exchange may be a strategy that could make sense for an investor. So definitely stay tuned to that tip if you're thinking about ways to maximize tax strategy in real estate investing. He brings that in towards the end.
Yep. Overall, great episode, great guest interview. So hopefully you guys enjoy as much as we enjoyed talking to Tyler. Hey, Tyler, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much. Long time coming.
Yeah, I know. We've been planning this for a little while, and I'm really glad we got a chance to talk to you today. This is cool.
Absolutely. Looking very forward to it.
So why don't we jump right in? Tell everybody a little bit about yourself, your pharmacy story, and how you got here today.
So yeah, my name's Tyler Dalton. Currently live in South Alabama. Fourth generation pharmacist, eighth one of the family. I always said I would never be a pharmacist. It was too boring. There's too many pills you'd have to memorize. And as fate would have it, I wound up back in the family business and back here in Alabama. I moved to Baltimore a couple years after graduation, worked there for 4 years at a small independent, and that's kind of where I got my real estate journey down there. Yeah, long history of pharmacy and entrepreneurship and all that stuff. So really ready to dive into it and hash it out.
I love it.
Yeah. And so now you got me curious about that connection to real estate. So is jumping to Boston got you started in real estate. So could you back up also and tell us a little bit about your real estate why? Like what lit that fire for real estate? And then where did you go from there, big picture?
Sure. So real estate's always something that's been a passion of mine. Growing up, my dad always was involved in real estate. He would have properties locally as rental properties or beach properties for short-term rentals back in the day before it was a popular thing. And it's always something I was very interested in. And for me, it was more of an economic reason. So I wanted to have an alternative cash flow through pharmacy. My goal was ultimately to be out of pharmacy within 5 years of graduation. We're at year 6, so I didn't meet that goal, but sometimes things change and, kind of building real estate along fluidly with that. So, the goal is just to have something else to do. It's a passion project. It's a way to kind of use my brain and just use my skills. So it's very fascinating. There's so many different avenues you can go with it. So I've always loved every single aspect of real estate.
We've talked to a number of pharmacists that have that same idea of like, I need a different way to use my brain, right? I have pharmacy and I'm locked in all day on that. And when I go home, I want to think about a different type of puzzle, right? Not the same kind of mental exercises I'm used to all day. So I think I really resonate with that. And I know others have as well. And you really kind of jumped right in, right? So when we talked earlier, kind of getting ready for this show, you did 10 deals within just the first 2 years. And a lot of people start off slow, right? A deal here, wait a year, see how that goes, branch out from there. But you were like, no, this is what I want to do. I've got this goal in mind, this 5-year, 6-year plan. Like, tell us about that. That's a really ambitious start to your real estate investing career.
Yeah. So like I said, I've been interested in real estate for a long time and I didn't really know how to get started. So, a lot of times you think, all right, you got to save up, you got to put 20% down. And gosh, you make pretty good salaries as a pharmacist, but to save up that money and, then you got to buy a primary residence, then you got to buy, whatever investment property. It takes a long time to do that. So after graduating, I paid down a little bit of debt over time. And then I was like, all right, I'm going to start saving up and then I'm going to start learning about it. And in the meantime, I figured out you can buy properties using your own money. So I started using hard money lenders. And that's kind of how I got my start, was using alternative funds that weren't my own. And that's really kind of springboarded me forward. And really, that's been the biggest blessing to kind of get started, was just not knowing you don't have to use your own money. You can still provide value to your lenders and other people, and still just make progress just as well or even faster without using your own capital.
Yeah. So for those that may not be familiar with the term hard money lender, can you walk people through that a little bit? What a hard money lender is and why a hard money lender would be a useful player in this game?
Sure. So typically, a hard money lender is someone that has hard terms. They lend on a hard asset. So they lend on the value of the property, usually 60 to 70% of the after repair value of the property, their first position on the lien. So if you default on it, then they get the house back. But, let's say it's a $100,000 house, they'll give you up to $70,000 for purchase and renovations that you can use, and you pay them back. Typically, you've got points and fees. Usually it's 1 or 2 points, which is a percentage of the overall value. So $1,000 or $2,000 depending on the price point, and then 10 or 12%. So it can sound expensive, but the ability to get in without using your own money is just you can't beat that. So 10 and 12% really is a bargain. Able to get in, do that value add, and build that equity pretty quickly.
Especially compared to today's rates.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, pretty close to it anyway.
Right.
Yeah. And a lot of hard money lenders also lend on properties that a bank may not, right? So if a bank sees that the house doesn't have a furnace in it or has a leaky roof or something like that may be a hard stop for a bank. But a hard money lender that is lending to someone that's going to do substantial rehab to that property, they may be more comfortable with that. They may have different terms to counter for that risk, but yeah, they may be willing to jump into that. And that makes it a lot easier to buy fixer uppers in particular. So then from that, it sounds like you're probably doing more fixer-upper type properties. Are you buying things that are totally turnkey, or are you getting in there and doing some work?
No, I like to do things the hard way. So every property I bought the first year, bought 4 properties my first year and 6 the next. They were all pretty heavy on loads. First one I bought, actually, my goal was to buy an investment property for my primary residence. And I did that, bought a fixer-upper in spring of 2019. And, they needed pretty much a full renovation from top to bottom. And then the next one I bought was a flip, and that was a full gut flip that took way too long, but it was literally top to the bottom, down to studs again, new roof, new everything. And so I just kind of learned how to do the systems, all the pricing, and I wasn't scared just to take action and kind of get my hands dirty. And, those weren't always the best decisions. I mean, looking back, there's different ways I would have gone about it, but having those reps underneath my belt just makes me more confident, able to kind of tackle any other project that it would come my way now.
Yeah, so I want to dive into that for a minute, some of those lessons learned in that, because I think that a lot of folks see on TV, like, oh, if you're going to flip a house, you buy this like terribly trashed house, you take a sledgehammer to every wall and you do all these things, right? So I want to tap into those lessons learned for a minute here. What did you see in that process and what would you do differently?
A number of different things. One, it doesn't have to be a full fixer-upper for you to still provide value, right? You can still do some lipstick or some really light cosmetic updates to make it a really nice project or property, which in a competitive market that can be hard to find. So that's kind of why I started with the heavier lifts, with the full rehab, just because, I was buying Baltimore and, there's tons of investors there and private capital coming in. So it's a pretty competitive market. So I decided to go with a heavier lift, but making sure you analyze the property very, very well, know the market, and then also comes to vetting contractors. I went through a number of different good and bad ones and just learning to kind of vet those. And I think that's just a learned skill, firing fast, not giving too much leniency, and just learning to, hey, cut ties, move on, go a different route. And I think if I had learned that earlier on, it would have saved me significant money and capital and a lot of headache.
Yeah, and some of those lessons aren't too different from managing a pharmacy too, right? Like with employees and all those same kind of things. A lot of pharmacy principles translate nicely to managing a team and working with others in that.
Yep.
You mentioned Baltimore, so I also want to anchor for a minute locations and price points. Like, are you getting in and buying like $40,000 houses that need a ton of work? Are you buying $500,000 houses, or what's this look like in your area?
Yes, I will say these are lower price point homes. The first one I bought was $48,500. Probably put in about $35,000 into the rehab, and today it's worth 170-ish. At the time, it appraised for like 135, which I was floored. It was that much. So, and pretty much everything else I bought in Baltimore, the most I've paid, I think, was 75,000. So all lower price point homes, after repair values, total value worth about 200,000 or less. So definitely lower price point homes, but they've been, good starting points, good stepping stones. And, I really wanted to focus on the first time home buyer's home. So if in the event that I needed to sell it for whatever reason, I would be able to easily flip it and sell it off to a single family investor or just a person for their first time home. And that's kind of what I've done with a couple of the properties as I've sold them off.
I love that. And it's something that I really resonate with for two reasons. One is that it's really easy to get into, right? You don't need to save up $500,000 to be able to do this, or like you said, you can use that hard money without that interest rate being absolutely crippling, right? So that it lets you get in the game and again, allows you to accelerate very quickly. But two, you're also providing really great affordable housing. You're taking a house that nobody could live in, putting your investment capital into it to benefit yourself, but also to benefit the community. And I think that's something that we don't often talk about, but it's really important to David and I and others that we've spoken with, that you're able to use that investment capital to make a really big difference in that community too, not just to put more dollars in your pocket, which is really, really neat. So I love that approach. It also makes me think though, this is probably overwhelming to some pharmacists, right? Somebody's listening to this in their car right now thinking 4 houses, how did he do this many houses? Like I don't have time for any of that. So what were some of the ways that you worked through that as a pharmacist and managed all the work, the time, the cost, like while having a regular full-time job?
A lot of coffee and a lot of leniency for my wife. So actually at the time when we were doing this, we had moved to Washington, D.C. So I was commuting from D.C. to Baltimore, which is an hour commute, and the properties were in Baltimore. So I would leave before work. I'd go by the houses, try to meet with the contractors, and then after work, I might swing by again. So not the most fluid system, not the most streamlined at all, but, just, looking back, if I would have built better systems and rely more heavily on the contractors and have vetted a really good contractor, that would have helped out. But just, knowing the end goal really helped. So, and trying to be on the same page with my wife. So that was a really big point, just having that open communication, her knowing kind of what my vision was for us. That really helped a lot, just because it was taking a lot of time, effort, and energy, starting out, because anything it takes time to learn, right? You're not going to learn a new skill or learn to be a pulmonary specialist without having to spend a ton of time in that realm. So just knowing the end game and knowing my why really helped kind of settle those days when it was stressful or things would go wrong or contractors would steal from you or you would go way over budget. Just knowing, hey, look, it's not going to be perfect the first time. And, maybe you might buy a house that might break even, you might lose money, but you're still making progress to where you want to be. And at the end of the day, I think that is a win. So you got to kind of give yourself a pat on the back and say, hey, look, I'm still working a full-time job that's super stressful. That's not an easy job by any means, especially in the retail realm or all pharmacy really. And then, still doing something else that's a passion project, but also, like you said, touching so many lives, from all the workers that are involved, the person that's going to move into the home, the neighbors that are not having a vacant house right next to them anymore. So it's kind of a cool thing if you do think about all the lives that are touched by most real estate and most development, but it's pretty cool to kind of see that progress.
Yeah, I love how the why ties in there, and it ties into your strategy a little differently too, because you're trying to build something that creates a whole separate set of income that lines up with your pharmacist's income. You're not going to do that by one house. Like, I know that there's a lot of pharmacists out there that want to have a house or maybe two as a way to augment their retirement, and there's nothing wrong with that. And for that kind of person, going this route of being that deep into rehab may not make sense, because you're really digging into a learning curve that served you for those next 9 houses and paid huge dividends as you learned how to deal with all of those headaches and hassles and putting one foot in front of the other with all the different pieces that goes into a major rehab like that. So I think that really makes sense for your strategy and can hopefully, help that why to drive that forward. I know also when people come on a podcast and they talk about, well, hey, we bought this house for 45 and then we put 50 into it. Like, it's really easy to, like, in 3 seconds say we put 50 into it and move right past that. But there's so much in there. So I'd love if you could kind of work through those numbers a little bit on an example project, just to show kind of scope of work and what kind of work you were trying to do on a house to improve it.
Yeah. So let's just talk about the first one that I bought. So let's see, we replaced most things from top to bottom. So we did a new roof in Baltimore, like $2,500, got all new windows, about $3,500. I had to do some waterproofing in the basement, which I did some myself, which was a huge mistake. Probably spent $15 or $2,000 working on that. New HVAC system, about $7,000. New floors, about 1,400 square feet. So probably spent $2 a square foot. It's about $3,000 on that. Got new stainless steel appliances, got new granite countertops. Both of those were about $2,000. So, and then a lot of just odd jobs, like replace some plumbing, electrical, miscellaneous items, $2,000 or $3,000. And then, overpaying contractors, let's throw another $5,000 for that. Way too much time spent. So it kind of adds up over time, but those things are necessary. And typically I was trying to also build in systems as I went. So I was going to put in products that were going to be long lasting, right? So I didn't want to put in just crappy carpet in there. I want to put in luxury vinyl that was going to be not only be nice for the tenant, hopefully it's going to last through several lives of different tenants, and then also just be a really durable product. So in all my homes, I pretty much did exactly the same format, same material, same colors, just to try to make it streamlined and durable all the way through.
I like that. And I love having that material list of things that you've used once, it worked well, keep recycling it. Even when you need paint touch-ups, I can take this 1 gallon of paint, I can take it any property, I can touch up anything. Like, there's a lot of simplicity when you're trying to work at the scale that you're working at. You mentioned that it was a mistake to do some of the basement work yourself or some of the other work yourself. Why, in your world, did you see that as a mistake versus something strategic about trying to save money or something like that?
So time value of money, right? So I would do it on my days off, which was usually just 1 day a week. I would drive up from DC. I'd go to Home Depot. I would get a paint sprayer, and then it was the wrong one or didn't work, so I'd have to take it back. I would waste a whole day and not get anything done versus paying a contractor a little bit more, maybe double even. It would have been done sooner. It would have rented a month earlier, which would have been another $1,500. So, it's not scalable, right? You can't. One, I have zero handy skills. I cannot do anything at all. So I think it's just way better to pay someone. I'm not trying to learn new skills. I'm not trying to be handy. I'm not trying to be crafty. I'd rather just pay someone, move on, and get it done correctly and get it rented faster. And that was one thing that on this project, it should have probably taken me a month. It took 6 months from a number of different things that added to that renovation. But that would have been 4 months earlier, could have been $6,000 I would have made and been in my pocket and moved on. So
I think that makes really good sense. I think one of the other things that I find fascinating out of that too is the overpaying contractors, because I think that anybody that's been in the renovation business always has that story of like a contractor relationship that went sour somewhere. So what is that, and how would a pharmacist that's looking to get into this recognize some of those warning signs of like, this isn't good. I'm about to lose money or something's about to be sour here?
Yeah. So one, never put down a huge deposit. A lot of them will say, hey, we need 50% up front. We need X amount. Say, hey, look, I'll give you enough for X material to get started. If I see the material or see the receipt, I'll pay you same day, or I'll pay you, after week one. And that's also kind of a learning curve. Like, a lot of contractors can be demanding. If they are, say, hey, look, maybe this is not the best relationship. Also using someone who comes from a referral, right? So you don't want to go into a market completely green, completely blindsided. You want to use someone who is a reputable contractor who is good to work with. Even today, I still have a guy that I've been working with. He does ask for a deposit up front, which makes me very frustrated, and I'm going against my word here, but I know he's going to do it. I've worked with him for years, but I still don't know why he asked for money up front, because I pay him within seconds of asking. But always be cautious. Don't be willing to throw out money. I mean, that happened on the very first project. I paid a contractor to clean out half the house. He's like, "Oh, I'll be back tomorrow. So, but pay me, and I'll go ahead and get it done." He was a preacher, all this stuff. Never showed up. Never answered my phone call. Screened my phone calls for weeks. And oh well, lesson learned.
I have a painter like that you mentioned, where he does great work for me, but he always wants like more than half up front. He's like, I need like 3/4 to get materials, and my guy's like off the job site. I'm like, man, I don't feel good about this. But like you said, if you find the right one and you've worked with them for a while, it can be something to get past.
Any other tips about finding that right contractor too? Because I think that there's so much value there in making sure that you've got that right relationship and investing that time versus just whoever shows up first on Google calling them, right? So any other tips about how you found someone that was really good?
Yeah, so we lucked out in Baltimore and Maryland specifically. We've got a great Facebook group, and I think every market's got them, right? So, just going to those trusted Facebook groups, asking for referrals, seeing if you know anyone in those markets. I think we're in an age where there's just so much material at our hands. It's really not that complicated to find a good contractor. You just got to, go through a couple phone calls, go through a couple people. I would say those Facebook groups are even better than Google or Yelp or certainly Angie's List or Home Advisor, just because those are usually investor-friendly contractors. They know they're going to work on a fair price and hopefully not rip you off. And if they do rip you off, then you can rip them off in the Facebook group and hopefully no one else will use them again.
My favorite are the ones where someone will comment and say like, "Oh, I recommend this guy over here," and then 3 people will say like, "Yeah, I also like that guy. Definitely." Like those are the ones that you call, because then you've got people who didn't even have to comment, but if they're going out of their way to drop that name and say, "Yeah, this person's excellent," that's a really good indicator that they might be the right contract for you. So I love that. Great tips.
Absolutely.
So, okay. So then that, again, working through all of that, you've obviously learned a lot along the way. So what did it look like for project number 10? Like how much more efficient was that? How quickly was that operating now that you've kind of worked your way through those hiccups along the way?
Yeah. So 10, that was the most efficient. So that was the one I had under contract when I was in Baltimore. It was a weird scenario with title and COVID. So it kind of got pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. And incidentally, we didn't end up buying it until I would actually move to Alabama. So it was one I did completely remote, and it was one I was going to keep as a flip, or keep as a rental, but just due to circumstances, I decided to flip it and use my guy Carlos that I was talking about, the trusted contractor, and we did pretty much everything remote. I'd never stepped back, never looked at the property, and it was super quick, super efficient. I knew which materials I wanted, I knew which color paint, and it was pretty nice to see that done pretty smoothly, probably better than any other project, just because kind of had those systems in place and just could go bang, bang, bang and knock it out.
Do you think you could have done that project that first remotely like that? Or was that just, you needed to have your hands in it for the first couple and then move on?
I feel like I needed to have my hands in it.
Sure.
Definitely not as much as I did before. If I had a contractor like Carlos, then yeah, that would have been smooth as pie. But, looking back, it's always 2020, but
we get that question a lot. Can I do this remotely? It doesn't work in my market. I don't want to have to drive. And so I think it's nice to get perspective from somebody who's done a lot that like, yeah, it's doable, but man, that'd be tough. So that's good to hear. And then you've recently pivoted toward short-term rentals. Like, so you made the move to Alabama, finished deal number 10, and now we're looking at short-term rentals. So talk to me a little about that transition and why you're going that way.
Yeah. So I wanted a little more bang for my buck, right? I wanted the time and effort and energy I was putting into something. I wanted a greater yield on a property that's going to be worth more, got a little bit more equity play, and make sure that my effort was going to get a little better yield. Like you mentioned, one or two one or two single families is nice, and you can build that up over time and add a lot of cash flow, but it takes a lot of those, right? Even if you're cash flowing $500 a month, it takes a whole bunch of those to match your salary. So I wanted to put something in where I could put a little more effort and get better cash flow. So I was looking at self-storage for a bit, but I decided to go with short-term rentals. I was in a group, a mastermind, and they kind of were pumping that up. So I got hyped on it, and I jumped on the train. I had a lot of friends that were doing it at a very high level. So I figured I could jump in, something tangible that I could do, and we could always vacation to, worst case scenario, if it wasn't rented out. But I was actually able to use a tactic where I did a 1031 exchange. I sold a couple of properties and used that cash to put into the short-term rental, and really had to put not too much of my own money into that property, which was a pretty cool experience. And my cash flow will be 10x what it was on those single families.
That's great.
So can you define for us for a minute the 1031 exchange? I think it's a really powerful tool that I don't know a lot of investors are aware of if they're not working in this space frequently.
Yeah, so it's a way that you can defer taxes. So on the sale of a home, instead of paying tax on the gain of equity that we have, you can parlay that into the next property. And with that, you just defer the taxes down the road. And the goal is to kick the can until the next generation takes over from you. But at least it helps you move on, and you can kind of take that equity and buy a bigger property without having to pay taxes on that intermediary. And you have to use an intermediary to take the money, and then they use that to pay for the next one. So you can't actually touch the funds. It goes into a escrow account. It's in voodoo land, but it's a pretty seamless process. The company I use, I literally wrote them a check and signed some papers, and it was super easy, super quick. And there's a lot of them out there, so I don't think it's very complicated. But it sounds troublesome, but it was super easy.
Yeah, the companies out there, I've had that same experience where they make it really easy if you find a really good company to do that for you. And the big thing that I learned, I don't know if you would agree with this, is just a lot of communication with everybody involved. Make sure the realtor knows, title company knows, your accountant knows, like everybody's all in the loop to make sure that everything gets done in the proper sequence. Because there's some details behind the scenes of what has to get done in what order and identified in certain ways. And yeah, there's no bending of those federal rules, right? Like you got to do those things right. So it's a lot of clear communication, but then, yeah, a great strategy to push some taxes off. So if I understand correctly, you were able to take the gains in one of these properties, take those gains, put that as a down payment, and really just scale what you're doing and 10x cash flow. Can you talk about that for a minute too? Because I think that caught some people's ears of like, wait, you can go from a few hundred a month to a few thousand a month in cash flow on a property. How's that work?
Yeah, so the beautiful thing about short-term rentals is that the potential for cash flow is significantly higher. A lot of people steer away from it because it's a little more active, which I'm okay with. Even with a lot of the long-term rentals, I was still involved in some of the day-to-day, even with a property manager. But just the potential for the revenue from short-term rentals is pretty incredible. Just because there's a lot of different pricing strategies you can do. You find a vacation destination, and people are just going to continue to go there. And I decided to go in the Smoky Mountains, which is insanely competitive market right now. Some say a little oversaturated, but we'll see how it shakes out. Yeah, it's just amazing how just that $200 a month is now going to turn into $2,000, hopefully more a month in cash flow. All that kind of came from that initial project, and use that equity to level up and go on. And I think that's a pretty common trend, right, in real estate, is that you buy something, get that skill, you move on to the next thing, and you kind of level up and level up and level up, and just kind of as your skills and your strengths grow, you just continue to expand and expand and expand. And it's pretty cool just to slowly over time, right? This doesn't happen overnight, but just over time, it's pretty cool to see that.
So is that kind of the play then, to continue to sell off some of these ones that got you started and grow into those? Or what's really the next 5 years look like for you?
Gosh, I don't know if I can look 5 years ahead. I mean, things change so rapidly. But yeah, I would love to continue to kind of heavily invest in some higher price point assets with short-term rentals, and probably back into storage as well. Just I want to diversify the portfolio. I want to go into markets that are going to be appreciating markets, but I know they're going to be solid cash flowing markets. Obviously the downside with short-term rentals, with COVID, things shut down, right? And people weren't traveling and you couldn't rent. So it is scary, and it can be, a lot of daunting, but you want to make sure your cash reserves are there, especially. But just having a diversified portfolio, continue to buy larger assets, using this equity. And like you did say, transferring some of those smaller single family homes into bigger ones, and just seeing what other markets are out there, maybe triple net leases, maybe different commercial assets, but just something that's a little more stable in landlord friendly states and landlord friendly places.
Love it. Well, Tyler, this has been super helpful and really inspiring. I want to switch now to our final section, our final infusion section. These are 3 questions we ask every guest on the show. Number 1 is, what's one tangible strategy? And I think you've given us a lot, but one tangible strategy that you use to make sure that your investing works hand in hand with your career as a pharmacist.
Yeah, I would say just find a niche and stick with it. So don't do all the things.
Yeah.
If it's turnkey for you got a bunch of cash, go for that. If you want to get into syndications, investing, something like that, just stick with one niche, do it, give it some time. If it doesn't work for you, then pivot and go to something else. But don't chain yourself to one specific niche. Just give yourself the freedom and flexibility to move if that doesn't fit your goals.
I like it. Yeah, especially as goals change over time. I like it. What's one resource that's been most helpful to you in your real estate journey, whether it's a book, podcast, person, author, website, whatever that would be?
I would say it started out with Bigger Pockets for sure. I mean, that has been the wealth of knowledge, got me started, got me listening to podcasts and kind of opened my eyes to everything. And that just kind of cascaded down from the podcast journey. But if it weren't for Bigger Pockets, I wouldn't be where I am today for sure. Just, friends or mentors or you name it, just you can't put a value on what I've learned from Bigger Pockets.
All right. And then question 3, what's one piece of advice you'd give to a pharmacist that's contemplating a start in real estate investing?
Start today. Again, find a mentor, find someone that you trust or know that's involved. Tell everyone you know that you want to get involved, that you want to get started. And the more people you tell and you talk about it, you'll be amazed to know how many people are doing it or want to do it or want to get involved. And the doors will continue to open as you just continue to talk about it and bring it to life. But don't talk about it for 5 years and say, man, I wish I had bought in the peak of the market or the bottom of the market or whatever. Just get started and, buy in the good times, buy in the bad times, and make smart decisions.
I love it. If people want to tell you that they want to get into this, or if people want to reach out to you for any other reason, how would they find you?
Instagram is probably the best way. Handles Dr. Tyler Dalton, Dr. Tyler Dalton. Usually the best way to respond pretty quickly on there. Glad to help. Always talk with a lot of my old colleagues about getting started, about how to get their own property, how to market for their own properties, etc. But just reach out. I'm glad to jump on a call with anyone and kind of help out any way I can, because I just love letting folks get their foot in the door and get the real estate bug. And once you catch it, you can't go back.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure we'll put that in the show notes. Tyler, really appreciate you joining us today. I think, again, just really inspiring to see your journey, and I'm excited to see where you go next. So thanks again for spending some time with us.
Of course. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you having me on.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to the YFP Real Estate Investing Podcast. If you like what you heard on today's show, please leave us a review and subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode. If you have a question, know someone that would make a good guest, or want to connect with Nate or David, head on over to yfprealestate.com and join the growing YFP Real Estate Investing Facebook group. As we conclude this week's episode of the YFP Real Estate Investing Podcast, an important reminder that the content in this podcast is provided to you for your informational purposes only and is not intended to provide and should not be relied on for investment or any other advice. Information in the podcast and corresponding materials should not be construed as a solicitation or offer to buy or sell any investment or related financial products. We urge listeners to consult with a financial advisor with respect to any investment. Furthermore, the information contained in our archived newsletters, blog posts, and podcasts is not updated and may not be accurate at the time you listen to it on this podcast. Opinions and analyses expressed herein are solely those of your financial pharmacist, unless otherwise noted, and constitute judgments as of the dates published. Such information may contain forward-looking statements which are not intended to be guarantees of future events. Actual results could differ materially from those anticipated in the forward-looking statements. For more information, please visit yourfinancialpharmacist.com/disclaimer. Thank you for your support of the YFP Real Estate Investing Podcast. Have a great rest of your week.